listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the Awards Watch Podcast, episode 179. I am your host, executive editor Ryan McQuade. Joining me today is Dan Bayer.
Hello.
And Zach Laws.
Howdy.
Just the three of us today. It's just the three of us.
Dream team.
The dream. Yes, the dream team. One member of the podcast for each hour of Beau is Afraid that we're going to be talking about today. I think that's totally fair.
There you go.
Good way to look at it.
We are going to talk about Ari Aster's latest film. We might give a little bit of thoughts, depending on if that conversation about Beau is Afraid goes a little long. We might give a little bit of thoughts on the latest Evil Dead film. And then we're going to wrap it up with a couple of listener questions. It's going to be a really simple episode this week. But there's nothing simple about Beau is Afraid. So we might as well just jump right into it. It's the movie that everyone's been talking about. It's Ari Aster's career killer. And we're here to dive right into it. So if you don't know what Beau is Afraid is, it's the third film from Ari Aster, who's the director of Hereditary and Midsommar. It stars Joaquin Phoenix as the titular Beau, Patti LuPone, and Amy Ryan, Nathan Lane, Parker Posey. God, there's so many other people in this film. Zoe Lister-Jones, Stephen McKinley Henderson, Richard Kind. There's even a brief cameo from Bill Hader. There are a ton of people in this movie. The movie, of course, is about Beau, who is on a journey home to his mother, and that's all I'm gonna say. Because if you go and look up this on IMDb, it actually kind of has a spoiler already in there. I saw this movie a couple weeks ago. I was part of the lucky group that got to be part of that April Fool's thing that already kind of kicked off a bunch of, I gotta say this because I really didn't get into that, but people online were so stupid, and they've already been very stupid about this movie, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it a little bit. But that's when I knew that this movie was going to have a stupid tracking from so many people, because when they had that pretty on the nose rug pull that they were going to do to us, everyone online was like, I would have been angry, I would have been pissed, I would have never gone to a draft house and done one of their experiences ever again. And I just
fuck all those people,
exactly,
because they're dirty fucking liars.
Yeah, I was like, no, you wouldn't have. The studio paid for your meal. Shut up and watch the fucking movie. What are you doing? Come on. It was so dumb. Anyway, that was just the beginning of what I think has been a very interesting road to get here for this movie. And Dan and I have been talking about wanting to see this movie for a while, because we thought it might have been a secret film that was going to screen at South by Southwest. I still hold firmly, Dan, that this movie should have played at South by Southwest, because it's kind of a movie perfect for that audience, to be fair. Maybe not the runtime, but definitely the film that we got, right?
I agree.
Yeah. And
it's only a few minutes longer than John Wick Chapter 4.
Yeah.
What's a few extra minutes?
It's a couple of 15 extra existential dread, in your seat. Two different kinds of thrill rides. I say play them back to back. Why not?
I love it. I love all the colors that you'll get from doing that. I love the existential dread you'll get from doing that.
I think that there's dread in both.
There is. There really is. They're both about the fear of dying in some ways. Yeah.
No one so far this year has connected both Beau is Afraid and John Wick Chapter 4. And yet here we are.
But that's what we do on the Awards Watch Podcast. We go in.
in-depth analysis people tune in for.
Exactly.
Exactly.
There you go.
From an
Again,
Awards Watch podcast.
again, the dream team right here. Okay. Dan, I'm going to kick it to you first because this movie's reactions have been all over the map. And honestly, I don't really know either one of y'all's opinions going into this movie. So I'm curious, Dan Bayer,
Yeah.
what do you thought of Beau is Afraid?
Oh, I thought a lot of things about Beau is Afraid. A lot of things. But what it boils down to, I think, for me, is that I will always have a soft spot in my heart for movies that feel like with every cut, you don't know what the next shot is going to be.
Yeah.
And that's this movie. I mean, to a T. Every time we cut to a new shot, I'm like, what is even going to be there? What are we going to be looking at? What is going to happen? I don't know, but I can't wait to find out. And that was me for like the whole 3 hours of this magnum opus in the literal sense of magnum opus. I don't think it's a perfect movie, but it's one of those movies where like the imperfections I find make it somewhat more fascinating and more interesting to watch. I was not expecting, for all my gamers in the audience, was not expecting this to literally turn into The Binding of Isaac for a few minutes there in the last act, which is still is. I still don't know, like, what the I what, but like, okay, I see you, Ari Aster, and I think we have a lot in common. I think from the past couple years, just saying. We've been going through some shit because I feel like this film just it really sort of spoke to me in the way I do tend to like style over substance, but you can't be all style and no substance. And I think there's a lot of style and a lot of substance here. Even if sometimes while watching it, I was a little iffy on it, the overall experience of watching it is so incredible, and there's just nothing like this movie, and that is always going to make me a little more positively inclined. But the fact that it's so gorgeously made and fantastically well acted from everybody, that really goes a long way, and I think it's kind of brilliant. I'm not gonna lie. It is like the bleakest, blackest, darkest comedy ever, and I love that.
Yeah. Zach, I don't think you and I, over the years that we've known each other, we haven't talked about Ari Aster's work on the
I don't guess we have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Suppose I just assumed we were both on the same page.
Well, we might or might not be. You don't know that because we haven't talked about it.
That's true. Yeah.
Dan and I have talked about it. I know Dan's an Aster fan, and I know a lot of people are. And so I'm just curious what you thought of his first two films and your anticipation level for this one, and then what you think of Beau is Afraid.
Yeah. So I think he's pretty close to a genius. Certainly one of the most exciting directors of his generation.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Hereditary. I thought Midsommar was a masterpiece. And so I was eagerly anticipating this film. I didn't even really know that much about what it was going to be about going into it. Like, I had seen the one trailer.
Mm-hmm.
I did my best to avoid reading any reviews before I went into it. And to echo what Dan was saying earlier, it is really exhilarating to watch a movie and not have any idea where it's going scene to scene. So many films are made um, with the same kind of like adherence to structure that is thought to be, the formula for a successful film. You see it all the time. I mean, I especially see it living in Los Angeles, aspiring screenwriters reading the same 3 books about screenwriting. And rather than using that as a jumping off point to say, okay, now that I know the rules of dramatic structure, how do I play around with them? You find people more often than not just carbon copying those same formulas into every single film and saying like, okay, like by minute 15, this has to happen so that by minute 30, this will happen, and minute 45, this, and so on and so forth, to the point where you see something set up in the beginning of a movie and you know exactly where it's going to end up by the end. And, some of those films are enjoyable. But for the most part, they kind of blend together with close to every other film that you see. And what I love about this film, and really about all of Ari Aster's, his 3 films, right, that he's made so far, is that you can't tell where they're going to go, especially not this one. And I love that. And it doesn't mean that I necessarily think that like every scene of it is successful. I don't know if it is, actually. I've been thinking about this a lot since I saw it. Right?
Me too, Zach.
Yeah.
Same boat.
But what I do know is that he took a giant risk with this film. And as Francis Ford Coppola once said, there can be no art without risk. Mm-hmm. And so I really I think that there are people who have legitimate reasons to not like this film because it is so far out there. And it's also a lot of movie, and I'm
not just in the runtime.
No, it's a lot of movie.
Yeah. It's throwing a lot at you. And I don't know that all of it is quite successful, but what I do know is that I appreciate the fact that he used the kind of out of nowhere success of his first 2 films to really take a chance on something, to like try to do something we've never seen before. And, what I would say to people, this isn't directed necessarily towards critics so much as it is directed towards posters. I think it's one thing to dislike this movie. It's another thing entirely to hope that it ends the career of all involved. Because then what we're going to end up with is just more of those carbon copy movies. Yeah. And I appreciate the fact that A24 gifted this man a seemingly blank check in order to create something that is totally unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I hate that like people have been so disgusting, like how did they give him so much money for this movie? I'm like, they gave him 35 million. Eggers had 80 for The Northman. Like, please, this is nothing.
Well, I wouldn't even say that. Like, Chazelle had 100 for Babylon.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're talking about this like this is some massive budget, and like
talking about like this is
for,
like
for him.
Yeah,
like for this guy and for this studio, like yes, it's a big budget, but please, like in the scheme of how much movies cost these days, even films by like indie auteurs,
Dan, it's a tenth of the budget of Fast X. Like, come on. Like,
literally,
and that movie looks like gobbledygook in comparison. No, I think
it's
a. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a testament to his talent as a director that it feels like $100 million movie when
Yeah.
in fact it's, it costs about as much as the catering on any Marvel film.
Well,
you
like
know?
that's like when I think like the budget of Saving Private Ryan was like 50 to 60 million.
Insane.
And you sit there and you go and you watch them and you're like, how?
Yeah.
How? Because like there were movies that were around 100 in that time period. I mean, shoot, that's like Jurassic Park. You know what I mean? Was an enormous budget. And I sit there and I go, he made a giant war movie for less than Jurassic Park. It's insane. And so like it's a testament, and I'm not saying that because I know people will listen. So I always have to be the disclaimer and be like, no, I do not think that Ari Aster is Steven Spielberg, everyone. I'm just saying is that some directors know how to stretch their budgets and some people don't know how to do that. And some also know how to put every single dollar up on that screen. And others, you sat there and you went, I don't see $100 million in here because things look cheap. You know what I mean? And costumes look like they've come off of the curtains in like someone's bedroom rather than actually like from a costume, like an acclaimed costume designer's work. I think that both of you are absolutely right. I think that this movie is it's such an ambitious thing to do. I was not a big fan of Hereditary when it first came out. I know.
It's
I
no
think that
accounting for taste.
I think Toni Collette's performance in it's good. I think that the internet has blown that movie up into a giant proportion, and it's a fine film. It's a good debut. It's like it was, and I think that also that movie was billed as a like a really hard sell when a lot of people were, and it was much like why I'm not a big also fan of like The Witch from Eggers is because like everyone billed both of those movies before I saw it as the scariest things you'll ever see in your life. And every time you get that build, you sit there and you go, I'm waiting to be scared. And I think horror is like comedy. It's in the eye of the beholder and it's very different. And but I haven't revisited those films in a while, but first initial experience didn't really like it. Midsommar, on the other hand, I love that movie. I think that movie was one of the best films of 2019. The birth of Florence Pugh, as a very big year for Florence Pugh. She had Midsommar and her Oscar-nominated performance in Little Women, so she had a very big year, and now she is Miss Flo. That we all love. But that film, director's cut, also too, really great stuff, and sort of a lot of the stuff he starts tapping in here. He's always been talking about dread, existential dread, grief, and this is and trauma, and the trauma that kind of goes with that. He would be Jamie Lee Curtis's probably like favorite director. Trauma. But I think that when anyone, like you're mentioning, Zach, asks why did he get $35 million? Well, because Hereditary was an 8-time multiplier at the box office from its budget to how much it made. And Midsommar was a 5-time multiplier at the box office from its budget to what it made. So you know what? Both those movies made money. And here's what happens. If you're with a studio and you make money for them, they reward you. And they reward you with a blank check, essentially. And they reward you with, I don't know, the creative freedom to make whatever the hell you want. And that's how it should be.
And it should be said, like, both Hereditary and Midsommar were not easy sells. No. So the fact that those made multipliers at the box office, that's really incredible.
Midsommar was like released in June of that year. I think Hereditary was.
It was a summer release too.
Those are summer releases. So. Now, I think that it helps when I think those have really great trailers. And I think that like this trailer's, I went back because I did not watch the trailer before I saw this movie because it was like Ari Aster and Joaquin Phoenix. I was like, yeah, I'm sold. Like, I can go to this movie. Like Dan knows I was really looking forward to this one.
True.
I
It's true. He was.
I don't need to know like the vibes of a trailer, because I already kind of generally know the vibes of this director. And I agree with both of you. I watched this movie and I did not know where it was going for the entire 3-hour runtime. I think that this might be like the first film really that I noticed a lot of Aster's influences, and how those influences on him as a director are used to sinister proportions. Like it feels very much like the Odyssey, and all those films that are being, those 10 films that are playing selectively in New York, and I knew about some of those ahead of time and I could see those in there. But it's what some of the best directors do. They don't lean heavy on just trying to recreate things. They use what they have seen in other films, and they build that and wrap it into their tapestry to make something pretty special on their own. Now, I don't think that this is a perfect movie. I think that some of its messaging is a little surface level, and I think that that's okay. I don't think every movie needs to be the deepest thing in order to be effective. Sometimes movies can be very surface level and they still are very emotional, very gripping, very suspenseful. It's a movie that I have thought about a lot since I saw. I don't think everything works. I think that there's 30 minutes out of this movie that could be cut out. And I could find it.
And half of that time is just Joaquin Phoenix reaction shots.
Exactly. If you just cut half of those, there are some sequences that I think just do go on a little too long. That being said, most of those happen in like the first half of the film, and the second half of this film for me is wonderful. Absolutely just wonderful. I was like, this is everything I've kind of heard about in Build. Everything when he starts getting into the woods specifically. Dan has the backdrop.
My God.
That stuff in the woods, the whole, it's like the play dream animated sequence.
That whole thing.
That's the best scene of the year already. It's not even close. Like
that is one of the most beautiful sequences in cinema that I've seen in that maybe ever.
Yeah, and
it's just gorgeous.
I was sitting there wondering in the first half, like, why is Joaquin Phoenix doing this movie? And then we got to that sequence, and I realized that's why you get Joaquin Phoenix to do this. You know what I mean? You get somebody like that has that ability for you to buy in to a full story within another story. It's very synecdoche New York almost at times when I was watching this movie, especially by the end. Patti LuPone serving everyone in this movie.
He didn't just chew the scenery, she swallowed it whole
and spit it back in your face. And I just think that she's incredible. I think that Nathan Lane is absolutely hysterical in this movie.
Amy Ryan too.
I think she's good, but
hysterical.
Like Nathan Lane saying my favorite line of dialogue probably this year. My dude. Like
my dude. It's so good.
It's so good. I think that the ending is a lot to chew on. Final shot, wasn't a particular fan of like that final set piece. Just anytime anyone tries to evoke a matter of life and death, a perfect movie, and you bring it into yours, I'm a very big criticism. This was a big criticism I had in 2020 with Soul when they had their staircase that was very eminent of a matter of life and death. And I'm like, you guys can't just watch one Powell and Pressburger movie and think that you know how to act, like why all that's important. Like that's the only gripe I have about all that yet. It's a movie that like I think it's Ari's best direction of his career so far. I think it's wildly his most ambitious. It's $35 million. It goes back to what James Gray was saying a couple of years ago. I think it was last year, that whole clip that James Gray had where he was talking about how every studio does not need to think that every movie needs to make $100 million. Sometimes it is okay to make a movie that you know is not going to make you all the money back that you put into it. And instead, you embrace it, you champion the director's vision, you allow them to make those mistakes, and then you allow them to fail. And if they fail to your standards, that's actually worse than it failing for an audience's standards. As a studio, A24 had probably their best year on record with, Marcel the Shell, The Whale, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Pearl, X. I can keep going. And that's just at the box office, let alone probably all the, merchandise that people buy for this crap. You know what I mean?
The Oscars that they won.
The Oscars that they won. And then I started thinking, and so then what's so funny is that they're a brand. They are a brand of film and filmmakers. So the hats there's been hats and t-shirts that have already been made for this movie. They're already all sold out on their website. They're going to make their money back. They're going to make their money back, just like kind of Dan, you mentioned Robert Eggers. That movie did not do all of its business at the box office. It was very successful on VOD and home video, surprisingly. And they said they made their money back and then some, actually turned a profit,
which
on
is
that movie.
Crazy.
And you're like, wow, they actually Focus actually put that out there and said that. Good for them, because then that means that the VOD market can work for movies like that. This movie's probably going to make like $10 million at the box office, but it's totally going to it'll break even when it's all
and the fact, like A24, the fact that they have found ways to monetize the movies that they have in their slate. These are very indie movies. Like, a lot of people don't like that, and I'm like, look, if it means that we get more movies like this, more movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once, if we get like another, I don't know, however many movies in the X universe Ty West and Mia Goth want to make, because they found ways to market these things, like, I'm here for it.
Jack,
give me all the action figures and weird stickers and whatever you want.
Zach, you were gonna say something.
Well, yeah, I mean, to your point earlier, like, it does help that movies like this and The Northman play in theaters exclusively before going to VOD, because I think like it gives it that extra kind of, because like when things drop on streaming services all the time that get watched within the first weekend and then are forgotten about completely. But what we saw with a lot of, adult skewing dramas like The Banshees of Inisherin or The Fabelmans, the sort of like the Oscar players that didn't do very well in theaters, they did killer business on VOD because people were like, oh yeah, I meant to catch up with that when it was playing. Just didn't get around to it because had other things going on. And so, I mean, I don't, maybe I should keep up with this kind of stuff more often, considering I am an entertainment reporter, but I don't generally look at box office returns because it's not that important to me. Like, I don't care how much or how little a movie makes. I just care about whether or not it's good. And this whole idea that, like, just because something makes a lot of money, that means people like it, that's nonsensical. Like, there are plenty of bad movies that have great opening weekends because people rush out to see it, and then you see they drop immediately because people are like, don't need to ever watch that again.
Well, I think also too the idea of, I mean, I know we're talking about this as a whole, but there's a lot to talk about within this film, and I think there's a lot to talk outside of this film too. But since we're talking about all this, I think that it's important to know that, like, you know, if you're reviewing a movie based on just solely how it's going to do for a general audience, you've already failed as a critic, I think, in that mindset. You're not even telling me what you think about the movie.
Yeah.
Like if Roger Ebert sat there every single day when he saw a movie and said, well, I don't know, this will work for general audiences, this seems like a career killer, then we're like, I just, I kind of wonder what it would be like for him to be around in the middle of this film, Twitter, tweet, a reaction, and all those reactions really, when you read them, mean nothing. You know what I mean? Because, like, listen, you want to hate and say this movie's not for you? Fine. That's okay. I think that that's fair to put up there and say, listen, this movie wasn't for me. I'm sure some people will like it. I'm sure some people will find something meaningful. It'll mean something to them. They'll be drawn into the creativity, the curiosity, the performances, whatever. It just didn't work for me. But to go out there and say, like in a rant on Twitter or in a video that's leaked online, or, to your, to the person doing your spray tan, whatever. It to me personally, you're not really doing the film any justice. And if you want people not to see it, you're kind of doing the opposite, because your over the top reaction is going to make people want to watch it, which is what people did. And then one more point, Dan, and then I'll kick it over to you. Is that like it almost feels like you're going after this personally, and that you walked into this thing purposefully already negatively, and this isn't calling any specific person out. This is just saying everything that I've been seeing over the last couple of days and last couple of weeks, is that if you're walking into a movie and you're already dreading something, then you're probably going to give it a negative review. So I can't wait out of Cannes or when these film festivals happen, because we're going to have the same conversation. I'm going to say the same thing to these same people. When they're bitching and moaning about Killers of the Flower Moon, people were bitching about this runtime for 3 to 6 months instead of just seeing the film and evaluating it from there. And I think that people need to just see the film first before you're already making a negative statement of like, oh, great, now I got to see a 3-hour movie. Yeah, because that's the real great mindset to walk into anything. Like, if you don't like long movies, here's also the other idea. Don't watch it. Just don't do it. You don't like
brag about.
Yeah. But then but then like be like, oh, it's too long. Da, 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 da. Well, you already said it was too long before you saw it. So now you're just being dumb and catching and it's
I don't want to hear about a 3-hour movie being too long when we all know people who have sat down and watched 8 episodes of a 30-minute an episode series that's 4 hours, and they've watched it in one sitting.
I was gonna say, like, don't brag about binging it.
But Dan, I'm at home when I'm doing that. I'm not.
Who fucking cares?
No, I know.
Who fucking cares where the fuck you are? My God. And the thing that gets me is, like, I would rather have a movie that has people who either passionately love it or passionately hate it than one that everyone is kind of like, yeah, it's fine.
I mean, I don't understand how people,
or it's not bad.
I don't understand why people are like, oh, Avatar makes $2 billion. It's a 3-hour and 15-minute movie. Nobody gave a shit. Nobody said anything about the runtime. Avengers can make $2 billion, and people are like, yeah, let's have a reaction video online. You know what a reaction video I'd love to see from a crowd? This movie. Because holy shit, the third,
really,
it's like you're sitting there, every scene in this third act, I was kind of looking around at certain points. We were all laughing. The audience was eating it up. I mean, it's been kind of spoiled, but there was a needle drop in this movie that was like
the most demented needle drop.
I mean, it wasn't even just the needle drop. It was then restarting the needle drop.
Yeah.
Which was like, yes. all the way, but then like everything with Patti LuPone is just incredible. Like the whole reveal and turnaround of that. I mean, it's incredible stuff. I don't want to give too much more time, I guess, into the jerks online, unless anybody has one last thing they want to say before we actually I want to talk a little bit more about the film and the contents of what y'all thought about it.
Look, I have nothing specific to say other than that if you are in a place in your life where a movie that you didn't like ends and you stand up and say, I better not hear anyone clap, I think you maybe need to do something about putting some joy in your life, maybe. Or,
I think,
expanding your artistic horizons.
Put me on the record, but I think
something.
that if you want to continue to go and specifically target one studio and then go on these massive tirades about said studio and how they should conduct business, and it seems to be like your personal vendetta, then I think that a certain studio, A24, should not invite you to press screenings anymore, because then you lose privileges, because there should be consequences for not even giving an opinion on a movie, but giving your opinion on someone's life. Like, Ari Aster doesn't know us a damn thing. Doesn't know you, doesn't know me, Zach, Dan. He doesn't know any of us in any explanation. He makes the arts he wants to make.
Yep.
We sit here and we're going to talk about it, and that's all that matters. Like, agree or disagree with the movie and move on with your day. He did not hurt you. He just made a movie. It's a movie. It's not real, folks. There's no giant dick monster that's going to stop the movie.
You don't know that, Ryan. It could be real.
Yeah, well, it might just be art imitating life then at that point for that person.
It could be. You don't know.
I would also say, just before we move off this subject, you mentioned Roger Ebert, and he always had this thing where he felt that, and he would make the case that ordinary people could like any movie, no matter how artsy or difficult it may be. And I think that for people to say that, this is not going to appeal to general audiences because it's weird and offbeat is really insulting to, quote unquote, normal people. And I think that you're the one who comes across as a bit of an entitled elitist when you make that argument, that these rubes could never appreciate something that is maybe a little bit more difficult and a bit more challenging. I think that anybody can appreciate any movie if given the opportunity. And I'll just leave it at that. It's, it's your job to review the movie. It's not your job to tell studios never to make movies like it ever again.
I mean, I'm going to say this. This movie kind of is what the general audience want to see. Because the general audiences paid money last year to the same studio to see a ton of these damn movies that have the same sort of artistic, creative vibe. And you know what? The film that won Best Picture is another one of those movies that had a complete creative control that got to do whatever they want. Now, that movie is obviously a little bit more accessible and definitely shorter than this one. Okay. And they're different types of genres, but this is a dark comedy, horror film, thriller.
I don't even know if I'd go that far.
Drama?
Yeah.
Like a dark dramedy?
Yeah.
Yeah, more than so. I mean, like, I think the definite tone is that of like an uneasy feeling. And then therefore you could kind of, you can have those same sort of feelings in elevated horror kind of films, Dan.
If you want to like really categorize it, it belongs in the same category as Darren Aronofsky's Mother, which is this is the new theater of the absurd.
Honestly, the movie that it reminded me the most of was After Hours,
Mm.
especially
Oh,
in the
interesting.
beginning, because both films ostensibly take place in the real world, um, but they are presented as these like nightmare fantasias in which the main character is just constantly besieged by problems, both large and small. Like I, I almost don't want to talk too much about the
Mm,
plot of this film for fear of spoiling it for people who haven't seen it, and also because it's very
yeah,
hard to talk about the plot of this
this is
movie.
very hard.
It's a very
But
scatterbrained kind
yeah,
of film, yeah, for
but
sure.
like you see poor Beau, expertly played by Joaquin Phoenix, I'll say.
Beau.
Um, just like going through little these tiny little problems uh, that are turned into these large giant misadventures, like just him needing to get water to take a pill
Mhm.
nearly destroys his entire life. Like it is, and I think like it's hard to categorize what genre to put this movie in because it does straddle so many different lines and so many different tones, which you can do if you're a good enough director. And we can argue whether or not the movie pulls off those tonal shifts successfully. I argue that it does, but some people it probably doesn't. You know, I've seen some people, some like actual critics, write negative reviews of this film, and I can see I can see the point of view they're coming from. You
Mhm.
know, like this is a divisive movie,
Mhm.
but most great art is.
Completely 100% agree, Zach.
Yeah.
Like, it's much more interesting when you have movies like this that almost like force you to have an opinion on it. Like, no one is going to feel middle of the road about this movie. You're going to have, even if it's just in parts, you're going to have parts of it that you love and parts of it that you hate. Or you're going to end up loving the whole movie or you're going to end up hating the whole movie. And I love that. I so much love that as opposed to something that has been just like minutely calibrated to be liked by everyone. Because where's the fun in that?
I tell
Whereas
Dan, yeah.
this has like so much
Mm.
going on. I mean, right from the very first frame, there is so much happening with this movie. It is one of the best cinematic depictions of high anxiety I think I've ever seen. And no, I'm not talking about the Mel Brooks movie. I am talking about actual high anxiety. Like that, there is a scene early on where he literally just has to cross the street to
Mm.
get to the bodega across, and it is like it. I don't even. It's like 28 days later, but with lots of people. It's like the block in Belfast when they're having the protesters happening. It's like it is madness. It's The Walking Dead. It's everything, everything that you can think of, just across the street, and you got to get on this movie's wavelength. You have to get on it right at that point. You have to understand that everything in this is just going to be heightened. Everything is at a, 1100, not even just an 11, you know? And I I think that is exhilarating. It is enervating because it goes on for forever. But I don't think I've seen a movie that has been so brazen and fearless in putting that kind of heightened state on film. especially recently, there's like a 2-shot sequence in this, or like a shot and then a reverse shot thing that is gonna just live in my head rent free for at least the rest of the year, probably the rest of my life. And it's when after Joaquin Phoenix's apartment has been like broken into and trashed, and he finally like gets everyone out, and he's sitting in his bathtub, and the camera is like looking down at him from the ceiling, and you see his face just a slow creeping horror on his face, and it holds for an agonizingly long time. We're just like, what is he seeing? What is he looking at? And I was on the edge of my seat. Like, what is happening? What is he going to see? Because I had no clue. It could have been anything that he was looking at. And when it does finally do the reverse shot of what he's seeing, it is hilarious and a little scary and a little sad. And that's this movie in a nutshell. And it is too much, but it's so much more. It's so much richer than I'm used to getting in movies these days. And I love that.
Yeah, I think that, Dan, all your points are correct there. I do think that the Amy Ryan, Nathan Lane stuff, as much as I love their characters, the overall time spent there, I think could have been cut. I think I think the stuff with like the daughter for me just doesn't particularly work, and it's a little, that's where like some of the things could get a little taken out. And then once we get away from there and we get to this sequence in the woods, I mean, this to me,
that is just transcendent.
I mean, it is as someone that has been thinking a lot, weirdly, for the last like year and a half about the idea of death and the idea of loneliness and the idea of legacy and the idea of what a world without them can feel like, and being separated from that world and then thus being alone in that void. It was one of the more heartbreaking experiences I've had in a long time at the movie theaters. And it's almost, it is like, if you just took that out, it's like the best short film that we've seen in a long, long time. The production design with it's incredible. This animation style, working with these other directors that Aster does here, allowing Phoenix to almost, it's a one-man play at this point. And then the makeup work on it too, the score.
Oh my gosh.
All of it kind of like, you understand then the poster and it all kind of blends in there. And then there's the way it all connects to the location that he's at and how it's a full circle thing. I was like you, Dan, with those opening sequences. I was on the edge of my seat because I was like, this movie has taken this massive turn, and it is, for me, I was like, I'm okay going through all that other crap to get to this point, because this is kind of like where I wanted it to be. And kind of the beauty of Ari Aster is that he finds these moments in a movie where you're like, God, that could have been taken out. God, that could have been taken out. Oh, that doesn't make any sense. And then you're like,
oh, it makes them essential.
Yeah, that's why we needed to get here. He is very much a director that is more focused on the journey than even in the moment. And the journey, like, just trust that he's going to get you to the destination. And then that scene ends, and then we kind of feel like that kind of ends the movie. that we were up at that point, because then the last, I would say it's probably about an hour at his mother's house is
My
is like
God.
almost another movie within itself. And yet they're all connected, obviously. But because once we get there, it's just everything's at an 11. And I think that, there's so many horror elements. There's so many, obviously, you can see that that Ari Aster has seen Patty LuPone on stage and knows how to use her correctly. He also he understands blocking really well, more than probably a lot of directors. We've talked about blocking before, Dan. The way that everyone is positioned in frame, and as well as then where the camera is positioned for reactions, and just the production design of that house, and how every room feels like a dark door into Beau's psyche. There's the idea of that. Is any of this movie actually even happening? Because
the
of the
production
fact,
design is brilliant.
Because I would attest that if all this is taken at literal face value, then I think that would be a mistake for the viewer to believe that. I think from the get-go, you understand everything is at a heightened, everything's out to kill me.
It's how
I'm
he
cursed.
Perceives it.
I'm on the razor's edge. Everything is out, everything is flipped on me. And I am struggling to survive. And I think that by the end of it, reconciliation or not, whether you believe that or not, I think that the ending is suggesting that kind of feeling is going to engulf you at a certain point, and it's going to be your demise. And you can keep running from it, and you can keep avoiding it, or you can do something about it. But this movie, I think, shows what happens when you don't fully do something about it. And when you fully don't take control, because even when he does try, he can't, because that's just not his nature. Because if you live like that for your entire life, it is hard. Like, we can just keep saying it to somebody, but we don't live through that person's psychological shoes and their being in order to understand how they can flip. And I think Aster understands that. I don't think he has this massive vendetta out against his mother. I think that, I saw him literally in a Q&A after the movie talk about that he goes to therapy. So these bullshit sort of like claims that have been out there that like he hates his mother or he needs to see a therapist. It's just like, one, do a little research. Two, like, understand that like he might not also be just talking about him here. He's just probably making a movie. There's that. But then also clearly, to get it out, sometimes it's therapeutic in order to put that on the page. And then obviously not everything, no one has ever said that Ari Aster is making an autobiography here. So I and no one ever said he needed to see a therapist after they made Hereditary. No one said he needed to see a couples counselor after he made Midsommar. So like, everybody just calm down. It's okay.
I mean, speak for yourself. I absolutely thought he needed to go to therapy after Hereditary.
I think we all
needed to go to therapy after Hereditary.
I am your mother. Don't talk to me like that, you little shit. But like, no, I think he makes a truly complex examination of anxiety. And in doing that, now, are some of the imagery surface level? Yes. But in terms of being able to display in such a unique way how someone can go through anxiety and have different levels of it, because it is a different level of experience. You're calm at certain points. It's heightened. There's crazy signs in the background. There's crazy imagery, all that different stuff. Yes, there is that. But and is some of it just, and it also might not be for other people. It might just be like, this is surface level. This is what it is. I didn't like it. And that's okay if you didn't. But like, again, like I don't think that I think that he's making it more about the character than he really is making it about himself. And if some of that bleeds over, I think it's a little bit. I don't think it's the full dose of. We're not getting like it's not Ari's afraid, it's Beau is afraid. And and again, he has clearly stated he has gone to therapy. He has not talked about his mother, but also that's none of our business.
I just
None of our
love how
business unless he wants to talk about that.
I just love how people on film Twitter all sort of seem to have psychiatric degrees and can diagnose a person's anxieties on site.
I'm telling you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't listen. As a budding filmmaker myself, it's impossible to make something that is not in some way tied up with your own anxieties, fears, passions. Most great filmmakers, they have like things that they're working out through their work. And like art is a form of therapy. That's why they have art therapy for people, it's just really
He's not wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tiring subject. Yeah, like I don't know. People saying go to therapy instead of make a movie. Well,
you know what your therapist is probably going to say? Why
yeah.
don't you like write something for me, Ari? And
Yeah.
session, why don't you write it all out and
exactly
just tell me how you feel. Oh, you wrote a screenplay? Oh, well, what's your profession again? Oh, you're a director. Well, maybe you should explore these feelings through that. And
why don't you make that?
If you're, why don't you make that? That might help you. And you know what? If the audience doesn't like it, who gives a shit? It's about, you know what I mean? Like at that point, it's like no one, this whole thing of like whether the director owes you anything. Again, they don't. They're there to make the best movie that they want to make, not the best movie that Dan, Zach, and Ryan want them to make. Because there are all times we've all sat in a movie and we're like, God, I wish this movie had done this or had done this. And that's where we can discuss. But at the end of the day, he's made the movie he wants to make. That's his vision. And probably for his mental state, it's probably the best thing that this is the movie that he did make. And I'm sure that there's maybe like a director's cut or there, obviously over time, there'll probably be things he would cut out or he would change. But that's then for a future project that he's already about to make, for him to make those changes and to be able to close this chapter, have those conversations about it. And if he doesn't want to talk about certain things, he doesn't have to. And we shouldn't press whether we should or we shouldn't.
This sort of discussion.
It's a very difficult subject to talk about.
And it's not about the movie. Like if like your job is to talk about the movie that was made. Again, none of us are like trained in psychiatry or anything like that.
Speak for yourself, Zach.
Well, okay, you might be.
I'm just kidding.
You do have a very soothing tone to your voice.
Tell me how that feels. How does that make you feel? Actually, I do have this couch for you to come sit on. So.
Oh, that's good because I'm feeling kind of tired from all of the discourse. Yeah, I don't know why people find it incumbent upon them to try to like psychoanalyze a person and make suggestions about what they should and should not be doing in their personal life, as opposed to just looking at the film as it was made and asking if it works on its own merits or not. And again, it's perfectly fine if you don't think the movie works, but I don't, I think to try to make it a discourse on whether or not Ari Aster is getting proper therapeutic care is, I mean, for one thing, it's inappropriate, but it's also just, it's missing the point of like why he made the movie in the first place. He didn't make the movie to have people pontificate about his personal life.
Yeah.
He made it to have a discussion about the film.
About anxiety. So, yeah, I mean, also too.
And about all the themes in the movie. There's a lot that this movie is dealing with.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, also too, it's like to again go into the idea of like he has a terrible relationship with his mother. We don't know that. And also not every relationship with a parent is easy. We don't know everything about them. Like, you may be a great parent or you may be a great child to a parent, but that does not mean that your experience is the same. My experience is not the same as Dan. It's not the same as Zach. So to say that we know what perfect, what it means to be the perfect child or be the perfect parent, you might want to set that one out because it's different for everyone, because every human experience is different. Now, that being said, it's a pretty fucked up one here in this movie. But like, again, no one's saying that it's autobiographical. Sure, directors take from their personal lives, but
they don't always.
And also, too, this might have been how they used to feel. And they've evolved. I know personally, when I was growing up, me and my mom, we butted heads a lot. We're now much better. Dan could attest to it. He's been in person with me, with her. It's much better. It's a much better relationship. Time heals a lot of those things.
It's true. Ryan has learned that all he has to do is just roll over and acquiesce, give his mom whatever she wants.
That is truly fair. It's truly fair. Or just not answer the phone. Because a lot of this movie would have just been probably solved if no one answered the phone.
The man could answer the damn phone.
But Dan knows this as well as I do. The existential dread of Beau was like
through the roof. Like, look,
that phone call, my God, that is as true as it's ever been.
My God. Yeah. And this is like the first taste of how good Patti LuPone is in this movie, when she's just like, I'm sure you'll do the right thing. And like, every person who has a mother who is alive knows that tone of voice.
And everyone
exactly what she was saying, which was, you better come visit me, bitch.
And every one of us, Dan, would sit there and be like, oh shit, get on the plane, Beau. Like, first class, all the way, the fastest flight in the world at that point.
And then on the other hand, like, I don't know how many minutes later, when he realizes that like he doesn't have his keys and all the things are whatever, and I was like, oh no, like literal worst nightmare come to life. And it's like, just like, oh man, like, what do you do? And it's one of those impossible situations that we've all been in, like our own version of a similar impossible situation, but it's very palpable in this movie. And that's what I think is so great about Ari Aster's filmmaking, specifically here, but also in general. I think this is true of both Hereditary and Midsommar, that he makes these mental states of his characters. He is able to find ways to artistically convey them, and so that the audience is basically living these people's experience right alongside them. It's really incredible.
I totally agree. Any final thoughts on this movie, just in general, before we kind of wrap things up and move
before
on?
We talk for as long as the movie?
Agreed. I think I'll jump real quick and just say I think that the performances are really great here. Again, the production design is fantastic. Again, I would shave 20-30 minutes off, but that's just me. Everybody's gonna be different. I am really happy that he made this, because I think that this is again why A24 is still one of the best. And those smaller studios are great because they allowed him to make whatever vision they want. It didn't, it doesn't fully work for me, all the time. The collective does, I think, overall by the end. But like, there are parts where I'm like, I could really not use this Ari or da 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 da. And so like the first half's like probably like a C to C plus, and like the final half is like an A minus, and so it rounds out to like a B. It is a movie that I am very fascinated how it will linger for people on after they're done seeing it. It's a movie that I saw like 3 weeks ago, and I've been thinking about certain scenes or different shots or angles of using the camera, the foreshadowing of like there's like a rewind and a fast forward scene in the Amy Ryan Nathan Lane house on a television screen that I thought was just like great sort of foreshadowing as to the events to come, but then still you don't know how those are going to be placed, like you both mentioned, within the story. And I probably am not going to watch this movie until the end of the year, but I do want to explore it because I don't have the time to go see a movie like this 3 or 4 times in a theater and spend like 3 hours of my time every single weekend. But I feel like I want to experience it at home, and I'll feel alone because I was with a giant crowd. And I feel like that will even be a different experience the second go around with it too. And it is really funny. There's a lot of like funny moments in this movie. And I think people are losing that sight of how funny it is. It reminds me of the sick humor of the Coens and PTA of how sick those fuckers are. You know what I mean?
I felt really awkward in my screening because it was pre-release and it was in a screening room. There were maybe like 10 people in there, and there were parts of this movie that I was like dying,
howling,
laughing because it's so funny. And it is just like the humor was just exactly for me exactly the sort of thing that I relate to, and everyone else is like dead silent, and I'm like
is he okay?
Sorry if I'm ruining this for y'all, but if you think this is supposed to be a 100% serious movie, you are clearly mistaken.
Yeah, and again, I think it should be like us to tell audiences too, like it's a bit of a fantasy. So like, so like, don't take it, even though it's set in almost in real world settings, don't take it so goddamn literal. It's okay to have it be a little bit more complex than you think it's going to be.
It's the kind of movie, like, again, it reminded me a lot of Darren Aronofsky's Mother in terms of how much it is like just an assault on the audience. And like, most audience people aren't gonna like that because they don't like films that antagonize them on purpose. But that doesn't mean that films that do that are inherently not good or worthwhile. There's a lot of worth to be found in those kind of movies, and examining why or how that sort of assault makes you feel and how it affects you differently than other movies that are, begging for your sympathy or your empathy. And I think this movie still got me empathetic with Beau in a lot of ways, and not in others, but that's okay. But yeah, that's I think this movie is kind of brilliant. And I need to say, like, I know like everyone has been all about Patti LuPone in this movie, and as everyone should be, because she's freaking great in it. But she sort of shares the role with Zoe Lister-Jones, who plays her, a younger version of her. And Zoe Lister-Jones is also magnificent in this movie. There is this one monologue she has where it's just, I think it's like an unbroken close-up of her face with this like color changing nightlight on her, that I was watching it just riveted by the shot and the colors and what she was doing with her performance. God, this movie is so good.
I would also add to that in terms of the great supporting performances by actresses in this movie. Parker Posey is a goddamn queen, and it's
I love her.
fun seeing her in this movie. I can't
The
talk
black
too
humor
much about it. Just
I will say, when her character finally makes her exit, the blackest of black humor, and that was one of those moments where I was dying, and everyone else in the audience was quiet, and I was like, "Y'all, this is objectively hilarious."
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like horrifying, but it's also hilarious.
Yeah.
God bless her. God bless Ari Aster for
Oh,
making this
God.
movie.
And another person like Parker Posey, absolute perfect casting
Yeah.
for that character. Perfect.
Yep. And again, can't state it enough. I think Joaquin once again continuing to prove he's one of those actors that just makes some of the most interesting choices. Consistently great work. It's really really interesting that like he goes from Joker to Come On to this, to Joker 2 to then the next Aster project to maybe a Paul Thomas Anderson project. Like it's really really fascinating. Just I think that like that shows like all three of those roles are completely different. You know what I mean? And this just shows his versatility. And and I think he's really great here as our our Homer. Essentially, he's the one we're going through this whole endeavor. But you understand his vulnerability. Not many actors can be that vulnerable and show that in an effective way. And I think Phoenix is really good here too. Beau is Afraid is in theaters right now. Go see it. Judge it for yourself. Don't let people online judge it for you. Go see a movie, whether it's 3 hours long or 90 minutes. Go judge it for yourself. That's all I can say. Is and try not to. If you don't know much about it, then just go see it. You know what I mean? But you probably already have because that's why you're listening to this conversation. Quickly, Evil Dead Rise came out this weekend. Made a decent chunk of change. Obviously, by the way, the movie that has made a ton of money this weekend again was Super Mario. That made another $58 million. The movie that's hit $1 billion. Honestly, astonished by that. We just have completely skipped that. We were going to talk about that the week of air, and we just didn't. We didn't care for it. I was
Perfectly fine movie, and it shows just how low audiences threshold is right now.
It just shows that we need maybe some more movies for kids.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I know more single adults that are going to see it than parents with children.
I think the return business would probably show that why it's probably for kids. But yeah, I agree with you, Dan.
I agree that it's more for kids.
Yeah, that movie is more for kids. It's not for that audience that you're mentioning, that, or it's like us who would want to, who grew up with this and found that nostalgia.
Yeah, it is not for us.
Yeah, it's not for us at all, which is the depressing part about all that. Evil Dead Rise came out this weekend. Quick thoughts, real quick. I know Dan and I saw it at South by. It was Dan's last film of South by Southwest.
Yep. I think it's a little hilarious that it's coming out the same week that Beau is Afraid is going wide, because these are both movies that kind of beg the question, what did this filmmaker's mother do to them?
What was your childhood like?
Like, what was your childhood like
Come
with your
sit
family?
on my couch. Let's have a discussion.
How is your relationship with your mother?
Everything okay? How is she?
Yeah. It's Lee Cronin certainly thinks he has a lot of very important things to say about motherhood and family, and I just have one thing to say to him. Please stop. You don't have anything interesting to say about motherhood, and no man should ever think that they do have something interesting to say about motherhood, frankly, at this point. I found it very difficult to have the kind of fun with this movie that I have had with the previous Evil Dead movies because of the violence this movie displays, particularly towards its main character, a single mother who seems to be a pretty decent person. He's really never really done anything that gives any reason for this sort of treatment, and then it just continues. And because it's an Evil Dead movie, gets relentlessly more and more violent and bleak. And when it ropes in her children as well to this, it just kind of lost me, especially since it just didn't. If it did have something to say, it seemed very confused about what that was or how it wanted to say it, which made me really, really sad because a lot of the horror elements I thought worked fantastically well. I thought the use of the records in this, I know that they've used them in Evil Dead movies before, but the way they were used here with the sound design of the coming out of those the DJ equipment, literally sounded like Bruce Campbell was speaking these words like inside my own head. It was great. Shout out to Peter Albertson, the sound team. I also thought that the makeup, the special effects makeup and gore effects were really great. Just, I mean, Alyssa Sutherland has a fantastic face for this sort of thing and this kind of makeup and character, and they just really went to town and had a great job. I love some of the gore effects. There's a moment with one of the characters eating a glass, and that took a we've seen like not we have seen this sort of thing in other movies before, but this they found a new way to visualize it that just made me go, oh, ew, oh. I thought the camera work even was fun. I loved the opening shot, the twist on the classic opening of the original movie, the actual drone shot. That was a great reveal. And I loved all the split diopter shots, even though they didn't always look probably as good as they could have. I thought they were really fun and, gave the film a nice visual sensibility. But despite all these things that I really liked and thought the film did really well, I find it just in the end a really hard movie to recommend because it just didn't seem to be worth all that.
Zach, what'd you think of it?
Well, I think I'm probably more or less on the same page as Dan, although I would recommend it just because I think it does. We've seen a lot of these kind of revamps of classic horror franchises recently. And it's more difficult to do than we may think, especially because, there's the one thing that kind of annoys me in a lot of these kinds of rebooted horror franchises is that filmmakers try to drive home the subtext of their, like the greater message that their film is conveying, to say like this is more than just a horror film. When if you actually look at the films that they are rebooting or remaking, that subtext is there. It's just more artfully and subtly put in there, right? So I mean, I think like what Dan's saying about what this movie, the points this movie is trying to make about motherhood, are a little all over the place. I do think that there's enough like filmmaking craft and the stuff that matters the most, the kills and all that stuff, to satisfy horror fans. I mean, because essentially it's like, what are people seeing this movie for? It's to see a lot of gore and a lot of creative kills, and it does deliver on that. So I guess ultimately I have to say like it's more successful at that than some other recent, not to name names, but
Mm-hmm.
other recent revamps
Yep.
of these franchises.
Yeah, I think I remember Dan having those feelings when he was walking out of the movie. We were kind of talking with it.
I remember
And
literally saying to you, I don't know why this of all movies
it's
is
the
the
one that
movie
got you.
that broke
Yeah.
me. But
Yeah.
here I was.
I don't think the movie is like, and I think I told you this at the time, and I still kind of believe it. I don't think the movie's trying to say really anything, any spectacular sort of thing about motherhood or anything. I think the movie's just trying to be an Evil Dead movie, and whether or not maybe then that means the formula needs to be changed or whatnot. But I mean these the Deadites have always just been ruthless. They just always
Mm-hmm.
have been, and they don't, and it's really like not holding any prisoners to sort of anyone, man, woman, or child. And I kind of appreciate that. I think that this movie leans more into the Evil Dead 1 original vibes rather than like Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not the Fede Alvarez film, which is
Bleak AF.
bleak as fuck is correct. That movie is very bleak. You either vibe with that one or you don't. I mean, like that one's, I mean, the tree sequence alone, if you want to talk about depiction of how something could kill a woman. And yes, there is, obviously the possession in here and in the elevator and everything. I think the kills are really good. I think that Lee Cronin's a twisted bastard, and and he has a lot more of the permission, and it feels like a lot more. There was a lot more of a creative process that was more positive than Fede Alvarez, because Fede Alvarez essentially, he made a film I don't think Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell really are that particularly proud of, like just because they thought they were going to make an Evil Dead movie, and instead he kind of makes one, but then he also makes one that's entirely his own thing, and it's really weird, and it's very dark and
Not funny.
not a
Like
lot
at
of people.
all.
Not a lot of people really want to fly back to that one a lot. You know what I mean when you're doing Evil Dead watches, but this one I think is more of like trying to gain that tone of what an Evil Dead movie can be more than that one. I don't think it's fully all the way there, because I don't think that it's, I mean, there are moments of humor in it, but it's not nearly as humorous as, I mean, like Army of Darkness isn't. It's like a comedy at that, at that point. Like, that's not even a horror movie at that point. Army of Darkness is literally a comedy.
Well, and I think that's my thing. Like, my favorites of the franchise are number one, Army of Darkness, and then Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
So, like, that's where I fall. I thought that these, especially Army of Darkness, got this like horror comedy slapstick better than any other purported horror comedy I think I've ever seen. So it's been like frustrating to me that neither the Fede Alvarez version nor this one really have that tone down. But they tried to go for it and bring that back here. There's a moment with an eyeball that is one of the most demented things that I've seen, and of course that did make me laugh a little, because like, what the fuck, they went there, they did that. That's fucking freaky. It's great. I love it.
But also, like, yeah, I think like the movie is its own solo mission while also trying to feel like, I mean, there's essentially now in the lore, it seems like when watching this movie that there's the 3 books, which are the 3 different the 3 different versions of Evil Dead that exist. There's the that are now all kind of connected in one universe. There's this book of the dead, there's the one from the Fede Alvarez, and then there's the one with Ash. Maybe there's going to be some sort of a crossover in the future, who knows. But I thought that, like you said, Dan, or maybe it was Zach, sorry, the record player stuff, I thought it was really inventive to sort of introduce that. That's it's different than like tapes and stuff like that they've done in the cabin. I thought the high-rise location was a really cool setup for that, rather than just being a cabin in the middle of the woods, which is essentially where we've been in the last 3 out of the 4 films, because we've been in like ancient times for Army of the Dead, Army of Darkness. But yeah, I thought that was great. I thought the performances were really good. The kid actors really, like, that's what could make or break this movie, honestly. And I thought the kid actors did a really, really good job. I thought the 2 female performances were great. I thought the last 30 minutes of that movie absolutely ripped. I thought it was really fantastic. And I understand what you're saying, Dan. I get it. I think that that's kind of what's heartbreaking about the first one, is that this is a band of teenagers. These are essentially friends and people that love each other, and by the end, Ash has to like essentially kill them all, and it's very traumatic, and there's a lot of trauma behind that, and that's a very dark movie too. And but that movie does not hold punches. It does not hold back on who it is and who you have to kill, and in order for survival skills and everything. And I didn't necessarily have the problems you had with it, because I mean, I think that it being a family here is even more horrifying and even more heartbreaking. And it being also like your nieces and nephews and things of that. I wish that it was a little bit more fleshed out in the beginning. I will give you that, to sort of establish this family dynamic a little bit more. I will say that I wish that happened. Maybe a couple more scenes with the 2 sisters, or a little bit more of that history to flesh out the turns that happen, right? But I just think that is sacrificed for some really spectacular set pieces and kills. A new Deadite queen, like that is honestly, as I was watching, I was like, how are they going to kill her? Because it seems pretty unstoppable. And I was kind of completely bought into it. I think that it is a completely disposable time at the movies. I don't think that there's anything particular that I was like, I don't go to Evil Dead looking for like what I'm looking for, even potentially out of like Beau is Afraid. I'm just looking for some good kills and a bloody good time, and them understand like tone. But then other than that, I had a good time with it. I think it's a fun movie. I hope audiences see it, because it's I think it only made like 25 this weekend or something like that. Which is still great, but like I think it was like a 65 budget or something like that.
Although not bad for a movie that reportedly was supposed to go straight to HBO.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Oh, was this supposed to go straightly to Max?
It's supposed to go straight to streaming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
But,
which is crazy. Like, I get it for the Hellraiser remake, but this, like, I don't know.
But
this is clearly a well budgeted film.
Yeah,
and the ways they found to spend that budget to make sure that it looks good, they clearly put their money in the right places, I think, because it really does look damn good, especially for this type of horror movie. I know we are the AwardsWatch podcast, and the awards bodies, particularly the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, they need to be put on blast for their continued neglect of horror in the makeup categories. It's literally what the category was designed to honor. And like, unless you have Rick Baker doing your horror makeup, you don't stand a chance. And that is just like something that needs to be fixed, because find me another movie this year that will have better makeup effects than this.
You say that, you never know. It could come out. It goes back.
Yes, I'm sure that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is going to just have game-changing makeup.
I just don't know what other movies are coming out later this year, Daniel. So I don't know. I mean,
Sorry, we just did a box office draft. You at least know what's coming for the rest of the summer. And you're the executive editor of an awards website. You know what awards movies are being launched this fall.
I'm sure the makeup on Cillian Murphy is going to be incredible. Are you kidding me? The one still of Killers of the Flower Moon alone has enough makeup. Leonardo DiCaprio is unrecognizable.
Looking his age. What do you know?
I can't see him anywhere in that frame.
And that woman in the thing with him, she doesn't look under 25. But we know that Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't spend any time with any woman over the age of 25. So clearly.
I mean, but that's also where Killers of the Flower Moon gets nominated for visual effects, because she will totally be playing a 24-year-old in the film.
Clearly.
De-aged, yeah.
De-aged.
There you go. No, I agree. I mean, Dan and I have talked about this in the past, how like
at length.
How did Pearl didn't get, or I'm sorry,
X.
X didn't get nominated for makeup last year. How horror doesn't get nominated, like Suspiria.
That was criminal.
Suspiria not
Crimes
get
of the
nominated.
Future.
Crimes of the Future. My God,
made the short list.
And I sat there and I went, "Be cool enough to do it," and you're not. You're not cool enough to do it. I agree with Dan though, 100%. Like, horror makeup is not easy to pull off, especially when you are in a well-made horror movie. It is the thing that carries it over the finish line. I agree with you, Dan. That's for sure. Evil Dead Rise in theaters. Go see both. Go double bill yourself. Go see that and Beau is Afraid.
Yes.
I don't know which one you want to start with.
Really fucked up time with mothers.
Have a fucked up weekend. Maybe take your mother on Mother's Day weekend. In a couple of weeks.
God.
I don't know.
That truly, like, for the son who really wants to make his mother feel loved this Mother's Day, take your mother to see Beau is Afraid from A24.
I'm not doing that. There's no way. All right, let's do a couple of listener questions and then let's get out of here. All right, guys.
Cool.
So
yeah,
Ben wants to know, what is your most hated movie ever, and at what point while watching it did the film earn that hatred? That's a good question.
My most hated movie.
I don't hate a lot of movies. Dan knows this. I'm not a hater.
I can tell you that I've only walked out of one movie in my entire life.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, and that was The Dukes of Hazzard.
Oh.
And I ended up seeing that. So I was like 15 years old when that movie came out. I went with my younger brother and our friend, our childhood best friend. I was their chaperone for the movie. We were going to go see John Singleton's Four Brothers that summer, but we just happened to be turned away by the one ticket taker who would not let us in to see an R-rated film.
Oh, of course.
So we had to choose whatever was playing at that exact time. And the only thing that we could get into was The Dukes of Hazzard. And I remember an hour into that 2-hour film, there's a scene where I think it's Ashton Kutcher. No, who's in that movie? It's William
Scott and Johnny Knoxville.
Johnny Knoxville, right.
The fact that I know that hurts myself.
They end up, and by the way, it was like the three of us and this woman and her child in the theater. We were the only people in that theater.
The wrong demographic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was sitting stone-faced throughout this entire film. But there's a scene where the two of them essentially mistakenly get into blackface.
Yeah.
And I remember checking my watch and realizing there was still an hour left. Yeah. And I turned to my friend and my brother and said, "Do you want to stay?" And they both said, "Nope." So we got up and left. I've still never seen the rest of it. Now, I don't know if that makes it my most hated film, but that's the one that sticks in my memory as I'm not going to waste any more of my time.
So look forward to the Dukes of Hazzard remake retrospective at AwardsWatch.com coming soon. Zach's first assignment.
Thank you. Yeah.
Dan, do you have anything? Have you ever walked out on a movie?
No, I've
Okay.
never walked out. I always like to hold out hope that somehow
Something
they're gonna
redeeming will
tie
come
it
out
all
of it?
together by the end, you know. But there have been times when I have strongly considered asking for my money
Yeah.
back.
Zach, you're better than me. I've never walked out of a movie, but I have wanted to many times.
Yeah. Which one? That'll be your most hated?
I wanted to walk out of one was it last year? Yeah, last year.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to walk out of Alex Garland's Men. Because
okay,
that
fair.
movie.
But yeah, fuck that movie.
I hate that movie. I actually, you know what? I don't hate a lot of movies. I fucking hate that movie because I think it is the you know everything that everyone has been saying about Beau is Afraid. Why didn't anybody say that same shit about Alex Garland last year? A fucking stupid fucking movie. I hate that movie. Yeah.
Because he didn't make something that could so easily be boiled down to mommy issues.
No, it's that I don't understand women. That's even worse.
I mean, I agree.
Yeah. It's far worse. Yeah, that movie fucking sucks. Sorry. It's just and when did and to answer Ben's question, when did I start hating it? I don't know. Probably halfway through, but I definitely hated it when the different birthing sequences started happening and there were 9 of them and I was like, what the fuck? So yeah, that's probably when I hated that. Life Itself, did you guys ever see that movie?
Did I? Did I ever?
The Oscar Isaac. It's from the Dan.
I very specifically waited until that movie was available to watch for free on Prime Video, and had a lovely cookie. Waited half an hour and then watched it, and you can still see my live Twitter thread being so confused by everything that happens in this movie.
I started hating that movie when Sam Jackson's voiceover started happening.
Yes!
It's quite possibly the most
baffling, so bad,
semi-racist pieces of dialogue I've seen in a long time.
It's so bad because you can tell that everyone involved in making this thought they were making something very profound and
they thought
meaningful
they were
and deep, and it is such trash. It is so bad.
It's one of those, you want to talk about a career killer? That could have been one.
Bullshit.
You read that script and I don't know how nobody thought about hey, there's some things in here that are.
No one who ever read the script had any notes about the bullshit that goes on in this script.
It's because you want to know why? It's because he made This Is Us and he got a blank check to make this movie and nobody said shit. And that
and I still support blank checks for these auteurs. I still do, because even this this is a terrible fucking movie, but it's so entertainingly terrible.
Well, it's not like it's Serenity or anything. Serenity.
I mean, Serenity. Look, it takes a very special movie to be as you need to ingest superhuman amounts of cocaine in order to make something as balls to the wall dumb as Serenity.
Very dumb, but also
that is just a masterpiece.
So dumb, but also I laugh so hard at that ending. When that kid walks away from the computer screen to kill the stepdad or whatever, I died laughing. Yeah.
See, how can you say any of these are your most hated when they bring you so much enjoyment?
Well, that's the thing. So that's why my most hated, and it's not one of the things that I've rated 1 star or half a star on Letterboxd. It's from last year. And look, I have a lot of respect for Claire Denis.
Oh.
But Both Sides of the Blade
Yeah.
is a piece of shit. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's a rough movie. That's a rough
I
movie.
love Juliette Binoche. I love Vincent Lindon, but
Wasted.
man, like I have never like the second those credits started, I grabbed my stuff and got the hell out of there. I don't want to spend another second longer in that theater than I had to. And, bless Film Society at Lincoln Center for their annual rendezvous with French cinema. They do a fantastic job with, having some great French films, that we don't get to see usually in the States. Love the programming they do there, but like, wow, this movie last year did not make me want to go see the rest of their offerings because goddamn, like what a pretentious, opaque piece of crap. I just sat there. I literally sat there the whole time, just hating the experience.
Yeah,
Some
it's rough.
movies are bad and they're fun. This one was bad and no fun at all. It took itself so seriously, and I'm sitting there going like, "Oh my God, you know."
Zach, did you see that one? Both Sides of the Blade?
I missed it.
The glowing recommendation right there makes you want to pop it on tonight.
Yeah, that's
You don't
right.
need to
Yeah.
see it. You don't need to see it.
I'm a big Claire Denis fan. It's not like I avoided it purposefully. It's just, I was getting my hair cut that day.
There you go.
What can I say? It's very.
If I can't say one movie that I do actually hate, and I remember watching it, and I did this to myself because I read reviews and I shouldn't have seen it, and I did, and I remember exactly when I hated it. Anyone seen Zack Snyder's Sucker Punch?
Yeah, I remember seeing that in theaters.
Yeah.
When did you hit? Excuse me.
Was it
When did you hate it?
When it was like, I don't know, the first or second or third time he used a lap dance to or a woman dancing to then transition into an action sequence. And then I don't know, when every character opened their mouths and spoke dialogue. I mean,
honestly, when you said the name Zack Snyder, I was prepared for any
of his
movies.
Mentioned.
I mean, besides maybe Dawn of the Dead and depending on your mileage with 300.
Yeah.
And maybe your director's cut of Watchmen, but that's pushing it. Anything past that is shit.
I was almost surprised you didn't go with Batman v Superman.
That was one night
Dawn of Justice, based on the novel Push by Sapphire.
I mean, I was looking at my wife that night when we like, okay, so Alamo Drafthouse does like a great thing. Dan, hold your breath. He's got the hiccups, folks. Dan, hold your breaths. You'll be fine. If you do that for 10 seconds, then they usually go away. The Draft House does an amazing thing, and I think they're doing it right now for Guardians because it's their first time that they've had it after the pandemic. They sell pint glasses based off like the movie that you're going to see, and they have local artists kind of do them. And I always got these things. This was before I was a critic, so like I would always, first night or whatever the screening happens, I get the pint glass and I go and see whatever movie it is. And the Batman versus Superman pint glass actually looked pretty cool. So I was like, okay, well, I'll get that. And then I'll go see this turd sandwich of a movie that's about to be presented. And I remember watching that movie, and I was looking at my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and I was looking at her, I was just like, does this movie make sense? Because I don't think this movie makes any sense. So then and we didn't like it. So then they're like, there's an extended cut. It's got all the scenes that'll connect everything. And I was so stupid at the time and naive. And I was like, you know what? I'll watch it. And maybe it's better. No, it's not better. And you know how I know? Because I watched it and I feel terrible. And I wasted so much money. But the great thing about this, and I think Dan knows this, is that I think I told you this at South by, is that I had the Blu-ray copy of Batman vs Superman.
Oh,
Use this.
yeah.
We used this as a Secret Santa gift, and it got passed around a couple of years in a row, and by multiple people, and it became the DVD of death essentially. So yeah, so that you can't really say too many bad things about it because something enjoyable did come out of it, you know. But yeah, nothing. I don't really try to hate a lot of movies because I have so much respect for all the people, maybe not the director or the writers or the performers, but there are a ton of people that go into making a movie, and there's at least some form of aspects of even my worst films of the year. There's, you know, I can't say that I definitively hate them. I know a lot of people are very hyperbolic when it comes to that, but there are some.
For me.
It's hard, but there are some movies you just like, man, they really suck. Like anytime Michael Bay makes a movie, it's very hard.
Oh, now, I'm a Michael Bay
Hey,
tourist.
Ambulance is a masterpiece.
Guys,
yes.
The fourth Transformers and the second Transformers might be the biggest abominations we've
Are
made.
only two movies in a career that has spanned decades.
And by the way, like, I defy you to find anything in the new Transformers movie, which I haven't even seen yet. No one's seen yet. But anything that is as wild and crazy as Kelsey Grammer's performance in the fourth Transformers movie. That alone is worth the price of admission. Okay.
It would be Zach if that movie wasn't 9 hours long. And
well,
I would argue the performance in that movie that carries it is Stanley Tucci. Because
this is a fake movie. You are all describing a fake movie that does not exist.
Oh, it exists.
Performance that
no, there's no way.
The performance that carries that movie is Mark Wahlberg's line reading of, "I think we just found a transformer."
Who, me? No. Anyway, that's a good transition to the next question. Because of the hilariously, this is from Ethan, because of the hilariously great needle drop in Beau is Afraid, what's everyone's favorite needle drop in a movie?
This is incredibly obvious, and maybe it's just because it's so fresh in my mind, but I literally can't hear or even think about Under Pressure now without thinking about After Sun. So
Dan gets points from Eric this week for mentioning After Sun. Yeah, that's good. I think of the needle drop from the cream needle drop in Goodfellas. Yeah.
Dude, I was just about to say one from Goodfellas too. I was going to say the first time that the piano exit from Layla plays over a montage of,
people getting
Jimmy
whacked.
Conway, whacking all the people connected. Like,
all the people that wouldn't shut up about the job. Yeah.
Yep. I just, Scorsese, one of the best at this. In fact, probably the best, because I think you can see his influence on people like Tarantino, Wes Anderson, all the guys who have like great needle drops in their movies, but just the way that each song selection works with the camera movement, the rhythm of the cut, like, you can tell that he just like has this stuff planned out and isn't just like making a decision after the fact about what song to put in.
I would also throw in, and it's because I recently watched the film, but I think what Altman does with Leonard Cohen's music in McQuade, Miss Miller is
yes,
it's perfect. Like, I mean, there's a shot when it's the shot right before the shootout sequence, and it's Julie Christie outside, and it's playing Traveling Lady, and she is contemplating exactly about that he's going to die the next day, essentially. And it's pitch black. All you can see is her cigarette, the snow, and that music and that swirling sound work that Altman does, mixed with Leonard Cohen's like haunting music, like it's a memory, like it's distant. Like Robert Altman, just perfect uses of sound throughout his entire filmography. And he was very much like him and Scorsese and those directors of the 60s and 70s just understood how to drop music or sound into their films and make it memorable. And then, yes, I mean, obviously like Linklater and, Paul Thomas Anderson and Tarantino and so many directors nowadays, they just use needle drops so perfectly. I mean, like Tarantino is now like the man that the modern cinema knows for a needle drop. He even does it in his trailers, because like using Neil Diamond in the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood trailer is such a perfect song that builds up for that trailer. So
every needle drop in that movie too, like the way he uses the specific the string recording of Out of Time by the Rolling Stones to during that one scene where it's like what is ostensibly supposed to be the last night of Sharon Tate's life. Right. Like I can't hear that
using
song
that
without
using that one I think of that like that one version of California Dreaming where it's more of a ballad than it is from the Mamas and Papas version too, and it's more somber as the day's ending, right? And Cliff is taking Rick home, and Sharon's coming out of the movie. It's quite beautiful. God, that movie's good. But also just using the 70s is never a bad thing, because of the fact that like that era has like just great uses of music, or 60s, that would be the 60s, but yeah, hopefully that answered Ethan's question. Last question, Josie wants to know, Earth Day was Saturday and Arbor Day, the celebration of trees, is this coming Friday. That being said, what are some of your favorite movies that depict the beauty of nature?
Literally any movie directed by Terrence Malick.
I was going to say The Tree of Life.
Yeah, like The Tree of Life. Other than like
The New World,
does Avatar: The Way of Water count?
Yep.
I guess so.
Those underwater sequences, man. Oh my god.
Baraka, the
yes,
documentary. Yeah.
Stunning.
No, I would that. Yeah, Tree of Life is the first thing that came. It's that.
Yeah.
God damn, that movie's so good.
The New World as well is very
yeah. Regardless of what Christopher Plummer says, The New World is great.
That was one movie where Christopher Plummer wanted to hire another actor to replace him instead of the other way around.
Movie that I think is one of the finer 100 films of the last decade. Leave No Trace. That's a movie. That's a movie that like, it's not just talking about these people living on the land, but it's essentially like the idea too of what Deborah Granick's mentioning about how we are living currently in our lives and how we're cutting down forests and things of that nature. It's not very preachy. It's not very showy in the way it does it, but those messages are clearly there. So I would say that movie in particular. Trying to think. I mean, any others?
I mean, I think about like movies like Walkabout, which was set out in the outback.
Yeah.
Like, any movie that's filmed in the Australian outback will really let you know about the power of nature, right?
Yeah. Oh my god, I think about the I love any movie where you have like white explorers getting lost in the Amazon. So
Mhm.
whatchamacallit, the Werner Herzog movies.
Oh,
Fitzcarraldo and
Aguirre.
Aguirre, The Wrath of God.
Yeah.
Embrace of the Serpent from a few
Mhm.
years ago. It's black and white, but it's gorgeous. Lost City of Z, James
Yes.
Oh
Gray.
yes, yeah.
That movie is really beautiful.
Well, that's
Apocalypse
like
Now.
Pocket
Like
Meow.
the
Yeah.
movie set
Twister.
in the Amazon. Twister,
Twister.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
I had to say it for Eric because he loves Twister.
yeah.
Love Twister.
Um,
Can't wait for Twisters.
Sister,
Twister.
Twister sisters. Um,
Twisters.
yeah, no, I agree with The Lost City of Z. That's a movie just about like the dangers of thinking that you can
Mhm.
understand nature and you can't. Like a movie like, and it leads to very heartbreaking returns. Like I think of Lost City of Z, I think of Into the Wild, which
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
another movie, which is another movie that's kind of just about the essence of, you may think that you know how this is going to turn out, but then nature has its own plan. And so,
127 hours, sort of a similar kind of
yep.
thing
Mm.
where it's like man thinking that he's able to conquer nature and yeah, unable to finds out very quickly that it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah. I think of Jeremiah Johnson too.
Yeah.
And then All Is Lost. These movies
Oh,
about isolation.
Wild.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a lot of good movies. These are good choices. Thanks for the question, Josie. Well, that's our listener questions. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Awards Watch podcast. Dan Bayer.
Ryan McQuade.
Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter as long as it still exists at
say.
Dance and Dan on Film with no blue check mark. Just putting that out there. And you can find me on Post and Letterboxd at Dance and Dan.
Where can they find your work?
Well, on awardswatch.com, of course. You can also find more of my work at nextbestpicture.com, including reviews of Evil Dead Rise and podcast review of I Was Afraid.
There you go. There you go. Just got to make sure that they find your work too. Can't search you through your check marks anymore. You know what I mean?
No, sadly.
Sadly not. Zach, though, has 900 check marks. So
I do, yeah.
You bought a lot of accounts.
I pay for Super Twitter Blue. That's my
and Elon gifted him the blue check mark.
He's got like 900 check marks next to his name, so it's very easy to find Zach. No, Zach did not do that.
Formerly blue check marked. I was one of those legacy guys who had his check mark turned white so that it would be.
I have a question. Do you guys think that when he sells this company, because he's going to do it probably by the end of the year, I have no doubt about that in my mind. What will happen?
He's going to sell to us.
I was going to say he's going to probably sell it because he's lost a ton of money, and he's going to, he'll sell it.
Oh, Ryan, you have such so naive.
You've been naive and thinking.
No, he is not the kind of man who can admit he's made a mistake.
No, but somebody will give him a bunch of money and maybe give him his money back, and he'll go away.
And also, who the fuck is going to want Twitter now?
You never know.
There's got to be someone worth billions who's just as stupid.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. But I mean, do you think you'll get your check mark back if somebody if somebody came back and redid it? Do you think
I feel like if I insult him loudly enough, I'll get it back eventually.
There it is.
This is true. This is probably true.
I kind of don't want it because I don't want to be associated with neo-Nazis, crypto scammers, and
weird celebrities he likes.
Yeah, like
Taylor Swift.
I don't want anyone thinking I paid for this. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Why would you want to pay for this? Like this is not right now. It feels very elitist.
I would say the those of us who can't afford $8 a month, us poor journalists who are just trying to scrape by.
It's just dumb. It's
so
it's so dumb. He's not going to make his money back from $8 a month from all of us. That's why
I
nobody
have to
should
say,
do it.
I know I have to tell everyone where to follow me, including on Twitter. But the great irony is that he could have turned Twitter into something that was worth paying for. Any savvy business person can. I think it's a reflection on his skills that he was not able to, and in fact made it even less worth paying for than it was before. Having said that, you can find me on Twitter at Zach Laws, and I'm also on Letterboxd and Instagram as Zach Laws as well, and you can find my work at AwardsWatch.
Yes. Zach will be having stuff coming to the website shortly. So look forward to that. He'll be back on shows. It'll be back on shows. I'll be here.
Yeah.
I know most of y'all don't care about that, but that's where you can find me. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find my work here at awardswatch.com, the playlist, in session film, a bunch of other places. Next week, Dan spoiled it a little bit already. We've recorded ahead of time for once, folks. We have the summer movie draft. 2 new team members. You'll have to find out who the new team member is when you listen to the episode. Some new rules, new picks, new movies, a lot of shade, a lot of competitive people on this podcast network. And I love it every single time. I was listening back to it recently and I was like, God, I love working with this team. This team's the best.
All in good fun.
All in good fun.
We love it too.
And but also before that is released next week, we're gonna have a show come out in between sometime later this week. You'll see myself, Tyler Doster, our TV editor, Eric will be back, and Sophia Seminole. We're going to break down the first 5 episodes of Succession. We're going to talk about that because in a couple of weeks we will do an episode on the finale in this back half of the season, and then on that episode in like 5 weeks, we will also start talking about the Emmys. I know. So look forward to that midweek. That's the Succession episode midweek. Look forward to the summer movie draft next week. And with that, that'll be it for the show. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.